Hello Money Nerds, it's Benjamin Mitchell once again. Thank you for joining me on Heads Up on Money on this Friday. It's another one of the exciting episodes this week because it's not just me talking at you. I've got an absolutely stellar speaker joining me that I've delighted to join and have been trying to get her to join for many months, and it is Ruth Sturkey. Ruth is a former chair of the Institute of Financial Wellbeing and practices and preaches everything we talk about in Heads Up on Money. Primarily that money is just the means to the end and that your wealth is very important, but there are more important things going on in life that you should focus on. Ruth comes from the financial planning world and was once a financial planner, a business owner, has left that world behind now and now works as a coach to other financial planners and educates them on this exact mantra on focusing on financial well-being. It's not about pensions, it's not about ISAs, it's not about chasing investment returns, it's about focusing on your life. And today we're going to weave all this together through the rough idea of, can money make you happy, or are there some other things we should be focusing on? So I'm sure listeners, money nerds, we're delighted to welcome Ruth. Ruth, thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you, Benjamin. Hello, good to see you.
Was that a fair introduction, Ruth? Or is there anything you would like to add for our listeners?
I think you've encapsulated it very well, thank you. I think you're absolutely right to identify that I come at this from being a former financial planner myself and business owner. And so that's allowed me to evolve my thinking about what the job and the role of a financial planner is as I've moved through my career. And now as I'm, unlike you, I'm not at the sharp end of talking to clients, but sometimes that gives you greater headspace, doesn't it, to reflect as well about the way I believe that the people acting at the top of our profession should be behaving with their clients. And indeed, what I think clients really benefit most from with a relationship with a financial planner. Unfortunately, a lot of the time at the moment, I don't think clients realise that some of the things that you talk about, Benjamin, is available. And so I think it's great that you're doing this podcast to try to get the word out about, you know, what we stand for is a whole lot more than spreadsheets and investment returns.
Yes. And do you think as a profession generally, and helping the end investors out there, the money nerds who listen to this podcast, do you think we're making progress as a profession to educate people that there's more to finances than just money?
I think we're making progress. I think the progress at times feels slower than I would like it to be. But you know, but yeah, I mean, I think the short answer is yes. I think certainly the type of financial advisors and planners that I come across, I think are very much thinking along the lines as you and I would, Benjamin. I think there is still an industry that exists that I think will talk the talk about the concept of financial wellbeing, which I think we're going to dive into a bit today. But I sometimes wonder whether that is more of a marketing banner than an actual true belief about this is the way that people should be approaching managing their money. But we're getting there, you know. Every step forward is progress.
Yeah. No, I echo with your views, Ruth, is that there's a lot of fantastic financial advice firms out there now that are focusing on this stuff. Some are still in the dark ages, but that's what separates the good firms from the bad firms ultimately.
Yeah. So.
And obviously you I know we caught up briefly before this, Ruth, and you kind of mentioned that with the benefit of hindsight, you see the profession being very different now, perhaps to when you worked in it. Is that a fair comment?
I think it's a really fair comment. I mean, I started in this world when it was still the days of products being flogged and commissions being paid. And I remember from the very outset thinking, what a crazy way to run a business that's based upon the need to sell a product and earn commission, which ultimately, if the client stops paying the premiums, as a business, you then lose part of that commission. it's never felt quite right to me. So seeing the evolution from, I look at it as almost that there have been three phases that I'm aware of within financial services. So we started off with just pure financial advice, which was more about selling products, and if you were fortunate, there would be some advice that was attached to it. That started to change at the turn of the century in the noughties, when the better firms started to use cash flow modeling and cash flow planning. That they started to actually define what good investment strategies looked like. I personally have always believed more in an evidence-based approach to investment rather than a stock picking or fund picking approach, which again I think is in line with your thoughts.
Yes, you're very welcome on the podcast in that regard.
Good. And around about that time, we started to get the birth of platforms, i.e. a place where clients could hold all of their pensions and ISAs and funds. And now we're moving into what I'm calling, so we had financial advice, we had financial planning, and now I think we're more moving into the era of financial wellbeing, which includes the advice and the planning, but has a much more of a human-centric approach, which is very much more about talking to clients about how money can be used to serve their purposes in life rather than money being the means to the end. Yep. So I think it's a really exciting development, and I think it's fascinating how we as financial planners, without getting too kind of evangelical, have the opportunity to help clients make different life choices.
Indeed. And that's probably a perfect segue for us to talk about the structure of today. As we said, is to think about, can money make you happy, or are there more important things at play? And I know, Ruth, I saw one of your talks a few years back, and you talked about the idea of the 5 pillars of financial well-being, if you like, of which 5 pillars of general well-being, of which one of those is financial, but there are other things at play. Do you want to maybe run us through that in some detail?
Sure. So I think that traditionally in our world, we have been solving for a problem called money and answering the question, have I got enough? Both of which are important things to do. But we can solve an individual's money problem if we're lucky, and we take a client on a journey typically through their working life, and let's say until age 60 or 65. And if they're fortunate, they are presented with a significantly large pot of money made up of pensions and maybe ISAs and other investments, which means they've then got enough to live on for the rest of their lives. Now, I think without doubt, that's an important thing to achieve for a client. But is it really what it's all about? And I think what I've learned as I've learned more about this subject, and indeed at the stage of life where I find myself, you kind of suddenly realize that there's a whole lot more to life than just a big chunk of money. So to pick up on your point about well-being in the first instance, so there's a number of different definitions of what well-being means, but one that I like, because I think it's quite simple and quite straightforward to get one's head around, was actually put together by Gallup a number of years ago. And it identified 5 pillars of well-being. The first one being having a career or purpose in life. The second one being the quality of one's social interactions, so family and friends. The third one being and feeling part of a community, something bigger than ourselves. The fourth one being health. What point is money if you don't have good health? And the final one being financial. Now, interestingly, all 5 of those facets are important for us as human beings. And it doesn't have to be an exact balance. And in fact, that balance will kind of wax and wane depending on where we are in any particular point in our life trajectory. But it is very important to actually find a balance that's right as individuals. And I think as financial planners, we've focused on the money. But how often have we spoken to clients who have no particular idea about where they're going in life, what their purpose or meaning is, that their health is suffering, maybe they're working ungodly hours, or that they're not keeping in touch with their friends, they're having marriage breakdowns, and they start to feel very isolated and not part of a community. So I think we sit in a unique position whereby we have the ability to bring our clients' attention, if nothing else, to consider these other aspects of their lives. And I think that becomes particularly important as people move towards maybe a time in life when they're not working or some particular transition in life. So we then have financial well-being sitting within this family of well-being factors. And curiously, the research shows that whilst financial well-being is perhaps the least important of the five, it most impacts the other four. So having money allows us to have, we can make different choices in those other aspects. So it's a fascinating subject when you kind of link it all together.
Yes, absolutely. And I like how you phrased that there, that the financial strand weaves through everything, whether we want it to or not. But I'm sure you've seen it also when you were advising clients, is there's too much of a focus often on that financial element at the detriment to the other elements. The classic one being, as you alluded to, perhaps someone who is on the cusp of retirement. They've amassed a sufficient pot of money. They have enough, whatever that means to them. And all of a sudden, they've lost their sense of purpose. They've lost the career, the social element, the community. Health may deteriorate. And then having enough really is inconsequential when all's said and done. We all know we would rather have health than wealth, but for some reason, we flip the priorities.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. And when I reflect back, particularly to when I was working with clients, and there'd be some clients that really stick in my mind that you think, right, well, you have got more than enough money for the rest of your life to lead a very full life. And you tell me you don't like your job, you tell me that you're burnt out, but you're not making a decision to change something. And I think that's quite fascinating. And I think I have a real appreciation now as I leave my main career behind about what's tied up in making that decision, that loss of identity, that loss of role, that loss of purpose, that void of time that suddenly exists. And I think also what comes with that is a sense of one's own mortality. So there is a lot tied up in the decisions that we have around money that I think we as financial planners can help our clients think more broadly about at any stage of this process, of this relationship, of this accumulation. But I think crucially as people move to a point of transition, which may also be retirement for many.
Yeah, yes. And if we were to maybe drill down a little bit deeper, if we were to look at it through now the lens of financial well-being, that's quite a generalist term. Is there a way in which we can drill deeper down into that? Are there some sub-strands of financial well-being you want to talk about?
I think there are. So I think, again, it's a bit like the definition of well-being. There is a number of different definitions that one can look to, and none are right or wrong. They're all just different models that are useful. And I think the same exists with financial well-being. But the one I'm going to mention today was written about by Chris Budd, who was the founder of the Institute for Financial Wellbeing, and was an early adopter, I think, in the UK to start to talk about this subject. And Chris identified 5 pillars of financial well-being. And the starting point, I think, number one would be helping a client identify and see a clear path towards identifiable objectives. Now, whenever I say that or read that, I think, God, blimey, that's a bit torturous. What the hell does that mean? So let me just unpack that for a moment, because I think it's important. I think it's important to, in the relationship we have with our clients, is to help them identify what a good life looks like for them and what those possibilities might be. And to help clients and help challenge clients around perhaps what might be their first and instinctual reactions. Again, an example of that is somebody comes in to see you for the very first time and they were saying, Benjamin, I need to sort my pensions out. I want to retire at 60 and can you help me do that? You know, the questions that would come to my mind might be, okay, that's interesting, but tell me what's important about the age 60. Well, isn't that when everybody else retires is typically what somebody says. And that may be very true for that client, but it could be that if they knew that there was another option available to them, that actually they might prefer to work to 65 because they love their job. They may prefer to stop at 50 and change career because that's what's important and they don't particularly like their job. It's more of a means to an end. So I think and don't get me wrong, this doesn't always happen in the very first meeting with a client. I think sometimes we build towards this as we build our relationships with our clients. But I think it's helping clients think differently about what options exist for them. And then thinking, okay, well, where we are, I always remember clients I used to work with. I remember meeting them when I first set up my own business and they said, Ruth, we've got a 10-year plan to be out of the publishing business they worked in. I was like, brilliant, great. I mean, ideal clients that know exactly what they want to do. Over that 10 years, that plan changed practically every other year. And that's okay too. And these were very engaged clients who were very clear about what it is they wanted to do. But what I loved about those clients was that they didn't just go, well, I've said that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to stick with it. A plan has to evolve. And I think our job is to help clients identify their objectives, but also be with them as things change for them and then adapt that plan accordingly. So that's kind of the first pillar of financial wellbeing, i.e., where are you heading and why? Yep. The second one is very often when we first meet clients, they actually need a little bit of help being able to control their daily finances. So what's coming in, what's coming out, what are we saving, what can we afford to invest for the long term, have we got an emergency fund, etc. So it's important for people in terms of achieving a sense of financial wellbeing to know that they feel on top of their finances and they're in harmony with their partner, should they have a partner, which isn't always difficult. And again, I'm sure you've come across partnerships where there's different thoughts and different values around money that each partner has, all perfectly normal, but can sometimes be a problem to be negotiated. The third pillar of financial wellbeing, which is a real, it is always my go-to, I've mentioned it third, but it could also come first, is making sure that our clients are protected against anything going wrong in life. So financial shocks, whether that is a loss of a job, whether that's an inability to work due to ill health, or perish the thought, somebody unable to work, life coming to an end, perhaps without, by an accident or illness. But have we got life insurance? Have we got income protection in place? Have we got the things that are important in? So, i.e., we're protecting the family. There's a very clear, important part to me around our job and actually creating financial well-being. The fourth pillar is financial options in life. So enabling people to be able to choose different ways of actually progressing through life, being able to, going back to the first point I was talking about, make alternate plans should they wish to, and knowing what those choices look like. And then finally, making sure that, we used to call it in my business, is that if somebody dies, that they're not leaving a mess for those that they leave behind. So it's, have we sorted out wills? Have we sorted out lasting powers of attorneys? Do we have the right life insurance and trust arrangements in place? So it's that kind of amalgamation of all of those 5 things. Again, all important and all to be addressed, not necessarily on day one, but over the early months and years of a relationship, that I think enable clients, and I think if clients have those things in place, they feel a sense of security and peace of mind and well-being that they may not feel if it's that thing that's always at the back of the mind that they think they need to address, but they haven't actually quite got round to.
Yeah.
So if we can help with all of those things, if you can then imagine that being the foundation of other aspects of well-being in a client's life, wow, we're really starting to have a strong impact on people leading a life that is full of meaning for them.
Yes. Yeah. I like that. It's almost like we are obviously in our world. We are not counselors. We are not relationship counselors. But if we can take care of the financial well-being aspect, it almost unlocks the ability to focus on the other parts that we talked about at the start.
Yeah.
And there was one question I was just thinking as you were talking there, Ruth, was obviously these points, they're fairly hard-hitting, very important things for a client to think about. And we often work with very well-educated people who are very smart in their own professions. But for some reason, when it comes to money and wealth, it's swept under the carpet, swept under the rug. And do you think clients know they need to deal with this stuff, but just don't want to open that little box? Have you seen that in your profession as an advisor?
I think there's money carries so much energy for good, for bad. There are so many people that have long held narratives and stories around money, which could range from I'm no good with money, or I've never got enough, or I overspend, to some people who are incredibly thrifty around money, to those who have an overconfidence around money, and to also people that are always trying to be searching for perfection, that have heard all of the stories that come from this kind of massive industry that sits behind us that pumps out a lot of information, a lot of which is maybe not relevant to actually ensure a good financial trajectory. And so it's confusing. Money is something that promotes emotion in even the most intelligent, rational expert in other fields. And so, but I don't think people realise that a lot of the time. Again, I remember sitting in front of many people who, genuinely believe that stock picking and trying to find the best fund is the best way of managing their money. And it doesn't matter how much I try to convince them that the data tells me that that's not correct, that they believe, somebody once encapsulated by saying that they believe in the tooth fairy, that there is somebody out there that's going to get something better for them. And then it ranges to people who are so bamboozled and perplexed by this word risk that is very often associated with what we do, that they will do nothing. And there's a great misunderstanding of risk. So money is much more complex than people often think. And so the layperson doesn't realize that they're carrying all of this with them when they come to see us. And so it can be quite surprising when we start to have some of these wider ranging conversations that isn't just around, can you sort the pension out, please? Or what investment fund is going to give me the best return? So I think it's our job to sympathetically guide people through this kind of myriad of emotions and help people feel comfortable in the decisions that they're going to make.
Yeah. Excellently put. And without making this too technical, there was one kind of final point in your talk, Ruth, that I really found interesting personally, and I know the listeners will as well. It's around this idea of set point theory, if I remember that correctly, and whether essentially money and looking after our wealth is something we can control, if it's a controllable element, or if it's something that's just within our DNA, and if we are not good with money, we will never be good with money, or we will never have a good relationship with money. Do you want to maybe just share your wisdom around that?
Yeah, no, I think I'm very happy to, and I think set point. So the theory that you're talking about was a theory. I'm just looking at my notes. Sonia Lyubomirsky was the name of the academic that came up with this idea of set point theory. And set point theory, I think, can be used in the context of money and money management, or it can be kind of more generally about how we exist as human beings. Now, some of the research that she came up, I think, has been not been attacked, would be putting it too strongly, but I think it's been questioned as to whether it was a wide enough sample size. But nonetheless, I think there is something interesting in this that, again, I think when we talk about money, we can help people think about. And this is the idea that all of us have a set point around happiness, i.e., if you think about things in terms of people having a more optimistic outlook on life or a more pessimistic outlook on life, we all have a bit of a default that we go towards kind of naturally, that you could say sits within our DNA as to who we are and maybe what we've seen over time and we've been brought up to believe. And it's been said that about 50% of our set point around happiness is derived from our DNA and kind of who we are, which is not insignificant. Now, very often when people think about happiness, they think about an individual's circumstances and that, well, they will make an assumption, well, it's okay for so-and-so because they've got lots of money or they've got a new car or they live in a big house or they've got a great job or they have an amazing holidays. So they look at and identify with circumstances and think, surely, if I had that set of circumstances, I too would be happier. But the research indicates that in terms of creating overall happiness, our circumstances only account for about 10% of what makes us happy. And then curiously, there is this 40%, which is our thoughts and beliefs that determine how we feel about happiness. So we've got our DNA, which is our natural way of being that we are kind of all born with around what dictates happiness. We've got 10% of circumstances which dictates happiness. And then we've got 40% of happiness, which is made up of our own thoughts and beliefs. 40% is massive. And the findings of the research was that if an individual could start to think more about their thoughts and beliefs and how they think about their circumstances, how they think about money, how they think about their lives, if we can prod people to think in a more thoughtful way and debunk some of the stories that they're carrying, that indeed we can help shift people's views on their own life and their sense of happiness by helping them do that. And again, I think by having some of the conversations that we're able to have as financial planners, we can actually start to nudge people to tell themselves almost a different story about their circumstances and about what is indeed a happy life.
Yep. I think a lot of the listeners probably will be quite surprised about those percentages. We would think, that circumstances in particular, a lot of people just say, this is my bed and I must lie in it. Essentially, these are my circumstances. I only ever earn so much. I'm never going to have enough. But by framing it in different ways is really the value of our noble profession.
Yeah. And I think it is about trying to help people recognize their own self-limiting beliefs. And to pick up on a point that you made earlier, Benjamin, we're not therapists, we're not counsellors, that's not our job. Mm-hmm. But we do have an opportunity to ask our clients questions that they maybe haven't thought about before and hold space for them to reflect and think. And ultimately, they're going to come to their own answers, but we can help support those answers by having some of these questions. And I think the kind of the truth, the kind of proof of the set point pudding came from looking at two cohorts in the US. One was a set of lottery winners who had won life-changing amounts of money, and the other were individuals who had been disabled in accidents. And they found that after a period of time, which was relatively short, it was only about a year, that each group, regardless, returned to a similar level of happiness 12 months after that life-changing event, whether it was something that one could typically think of as being an amazingly positive thing, i.e. winning lots of money, or terribly life-changing by having an accident that causes some form of disability. The circumstances were both had changed, but ultimately they each returned to their same set point of happiness a 12-month period or so after the event, which is kind of, and I think that's what that points to, is that our ability to adapt to our changing circumstances is very dependent upon both our natural ability for happiness or sadness and our ability to think positively about our circumstances.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I always quite enjoy reading about these studies, and there's the classic one. I can't remember the exact figures, but that idea of you earn a certain amount in your career, and anything beyond that is actually depleting your happiness. There's a sweet spot, finding that balance, and then it pivots the other direction. And it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's that is quite an interesting one. So that was, I think it was from Kahneman and Deaton, and it was, I think it was something around 2007 that came out that suggested that happiness plateaus after earnings of about 75,000. It was dollars because it was a US study, but it would probably be £100,000 or so today. That it's interesting. There's been further research done on that, which seems to suggest that actually more money does bring more happiness if you have a propensity to happiness as your earnings continue to increase, and indeed that you have the other aspects of well-being in place that we spoke about earlier. And it's not just a desire to accumulate more throughout life. So that, I mean, again, I think this is what's great about this. So we have a point of research, and then we find, okay, well, that's evolved. We've got further evidence now to suggest that maybe that wasn't quite true, that it was more looking at levels of unhappiness versus levels of absolute happiness. But I think nonetheless, I think the message is clear. It's about the way that we are thinking about our circumstances rather than the absolute of our circumstances. That's the important thing. Because we've all probably spoken to people, whether it's family members, clients, or friends, who seem to have got all the money that they could ever possibly need, and they're still bloody miserable. So there's clearly something else going on.
Yeah. Often I find is that new problems present at that level. It's a question of I don't want to be seen to be wealthy, whatever that means, and then there's the, without getting into too much of the specifics, but then it becomes the whole inheritance tax issue, and just new problems present. You just move from not having enough to having too much, and it's difficult to strike that balance often.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? How, what are we humans? It's almost like we need to be having something to be mithering about. Even in the context of inheritance tax, where we're no longer here. We've done the best we can, hopefully. We could probably go off on a right tangent.
And I think us Brits, we're often not the best with that either. We, as you say, we do love something to complain about. So if I bring it back to kind of the age old question, Ruth, around can money, can being wealthy, whatever that means, make you happy? Very tricky question. I'll give you 10 seconds to answer it. No, I'm joking. What would be your take from all of your experience around this financial well-being area?
I would say the answer is yes, no, and maybe.
I love it.
And Again, I think it makes sense, doesn't it? Again, we all know we see people who have got money and they live a very meaningful and purposeful life full of joy. We see people with money where the money has just created those problems that you just mentioned, where in fact they're now worried about their money rather than using money to promote happiness. And then we've got this kind of in-between thing, which is probably defined as a human condition, whereby we can move between both of those areas. And so I think it's like, look, it's clearly there is a level of money that anybody needs living in a modern life to be able to. I think money can take away worry, and that counts for such a lot, doesn't it? As long as money then doesn't become the source of worry.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I think the ability of money to take away worry and a sense of living on a budget which doesn't stretch to last the month, look, that's really not a nice space to be living in. So yes, I think money can, but it can also be quite a malign force as well. And I think it's, again, we have the opportunity to be able to help people with some of these incredibly strong emotions that come up.
Yes. I will not even add anything to that because I can't put it better than that, Ruth. I mean, I could honestly talk to you about this for hours on end, because it's such a fun topic. I do lots of episodes of the podcast, and some of them are far more technical. We start talking about pension annual allowances and gifting exemptions, and important as they are, because people need to know the rules of the game, this is the stuff that is properly exciting. And yeah, you are a source of so much knowledge around this, Ruth. So have you anything else you would like to mention today, Ruth, while we've got you on the podcast?
I think I think it's an interesting one. So I think the two things that come to mind. I think if we have any fellow financial professionals listening to this, if you're not already thinking about having these conversations with your clients, then please do. And actually, it is a really rewarding and interesting aspect of the job. And I think as we know technology is going to have an impact in our world with AI, and let's be positive about that. Let's say that's good news. How else can we add value to our clients? So think about it. Don't say it's not for me, or I don't know what to do. We can all learn this.
Yep.
And then I think if you've got your money nerds, as you referred to your listeners, I would encourage them to really stop and think about what does money mean, and go beyond the answers that immediately come to mind, such as freedom, typically freedom and security, choice and opportunity. Yes, of course, it's all of those things. But what do we mean when we say freedom? What do we mean when we say security? What do we mean when we say options? And finally, thing on that, when you think about your overall life and you think about those 5 pillars of well-being, purpose/career, quality of friendships and relationships, being part of a community, health, and money, are you addressing all of those things when you're thinking about your life as a whole?
Yep. No, very, very good point. I think that's one that will resonate with the listeners long after this episode. So again, thank you so much, Ruth. The episodes I enjoy the most are the ones where I learn a lot, and I've genuinely learned a lot from your experiences today. If anybody listening wants to find out a little bit more about you and what you're doing now, do you have a website or anything I can direct the money nerds to?
Yeah, thank you, Benjamin. I do. And it's very straightforward. It's just ruthsturkey.com. Website, as we're speaking today in early October, is currently being updated. But yeah, that's the easiest place to find me, or LinkedIn.
Great.
I'm on as well.
Okay, well, I'll include your website and your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, Ruth.
Thank you.
And again, thank you so much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed speaking with me today around this topic. It's clearly something you're very passionate about. And I'm sure our listeners will get a huge amount of value. So thank you, Ruth, for joining us. And Money Nerds, thank you as always for listening to Heads Up on Money. This has been a really fun one, a lighter one in many ways, but also a more profound and deeper one in many ways. Lots of things to be thinking about as you go into your weekend. So I will see you next Friday. It'll just be my dulcet tones next Friday. We won't have Ruth joining us, sadly. It'd be great to have her back on the podcast at some time in the future. I'm sure you'll agree, because she has so much knowledge to share in this area.